Supreme Court vacancy, and the furor over Roe versus Wade next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke, and thank you again for joining us. As always, I am joined by Katie Petrick of The Healthy Republic. For the countdown, this week we have an all Supreme Court Roe versus Wade theme.
Yep. So what happened Monday night is President Trump made his selection, his nominee for the Supreme Court to replace Anthony Kennedy. And it turned out to be Brett Kavanaugh. He's 53, and he's a U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals judge from the D.C. Circuit. Now, he's been a D.C. guy all his life. He's married, has 2 wonderful girls. He's a solid pick for President Trump. He's not the pick that all the conservatives necessarily wanted, but he is a solid pick. And even before the pick happened, the left went crazy. And mostly they're going crazy because of Roe versus Wade. So I think we're going to focus on that today. Basically what happened already before we even got 24 hours into the selection, we had Nerol come out with a tweet that says, "We'll be damned if we're going to let 5 men, including some frat boy named Brett, strip us of our hard-won bodily autonomy and reproductive rights." Nerol, Stephen Colbert, they're all focusing their attention on Brett Kavanaugh as Brett the guy, and that somehow he's going to be the reason that Roe v. Wade gets overturned.
Yeah, the thing that interested me about all of this is that we knew this was going to happen, right? No matter who Donald Trump had picked to do this, to fill this position, they would have been all over him, right? Or her, for that matter. In fact, it would have been worse for a woman. Interestingly, though, of all the candidates on the short list, Kavanaugh is the most insider. He's the most beltway type. He is the least predictable when it comes to Roe versus Wade. So given the 4 people that were finalists, this is the one the left should be most comfortable with, I would think, at least with regards to Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade. And Roe versus Wade is the issue here. I love the fact that it speaks volumes about the American left, that there's so little that you can dirt on Brett Kavanaugh that you got to go after his name. And it blows me away that somebody like Stephen Colbert, and remember, let's not forget that Stephen Colbert, his name until he became famous used to be Colbert, Stephen Colbert. But as his profile began to rise, the pretentious Stephen Colbert went all French on us, right?
Oui, oui.
Now, if I have a choice between a guy with the first name of Brett or a guy who Frenchifies his name, the masculinity quotient is way higher for the Brett than it is for the fake Frenchy guy.
Yeah, and the left had, and still to this day, has pretty much nothing that they can get on Brett Kavanaugh. He's an American guy. He likes baseball, as we learned that he got into a little credit card debt and paid it off because he bought some Washington Nationals tickets. He works at a soup kitchen. He volunteers at a soup kitchen. He's a staunch Catholic. He's an American guy, and the left, that drives them crazy. And we saw that by all their actions to this point.
Yeah, we are at the point, and if you're not aware of this, pay attention. What the American progressive left is doing is now redefining normality away from traditional things. Male and female now are passé. If you are a staunch supporter of man or woman, you're a problem. If you like baseball, apple pie in the United States, if you're a flag-waving, Constitution-supporting American, you are now a backward troglodyte, according to the American left. Cowboys. It's a great story in the news about how Wyoming University, the Cowboys, they have a new ad plan touting, come to our school and be a cowboy, right? And the academic left is going nuts. This is racist. This is offensive. This is xenophobic and nationalistic. So pretty much every aspect of American culture, manhood, masculinity, the military, the police, firefighters, for God's sake, every aspect of American traditional culture is now being repainted by the left as extreme, radical, and dangerous. And this is a huge problem we have to overcome. The classic example of this, and you're going to get to this in the stories, is Michelle Wolf, right? And you'll talk about Michelle.
On her Netflix show, decided that, you know what, she's the most patriotic of all of Americans, and she wanted abortion to get its own patriotic salute. And so she went on her show and she said, "God bless abortion, God bless America," and she did this entire skit, which was absolutely awful. I couldn't even make it through the whole thing. So this is the left's shtick, I guess. This is what they want to hang their hats on. This is the hill they're going to die on, basically, is the issue of abortion, and Michelle Wolf is contributing to that.
Yeah, and if you go back to that pic, Mike, the image of Michelle Wolf is exactly what I'm trying to convey. Her entire monologue here, her screed, is all about how abortion is America, that America lives for abortion, that the Constitution was created for no other reason than to support abortion. One of her main arguments that she's decked out all in the flag, right? What they are doing is they are mainstreaming as as traditional American values, radical anti-American leftist values. And one of her arguments was, and you can't even parody this, one of her arguments was, the purpose of abortion is to stop babies from being. Purpose of abortion is not to destroy babies, she says. It's to stop babies from being made. With all due respect, Michelle Wolf, that's birth control. The purpose of birth control is to prevent babies from being created. Abortion stops babies once you have created them. The fact that you're disingenuous, you're just a liar, right? And people who've warned us about abortion have warned us about it for 40 years, that pretty soon you are going to get to a culture where abortion is birth control. And that's firmly where we've landed today. Abortion is birth control. And if you can make that argument that it is patriotic, that it is a glorious patriotic thing to kill babies in the name of feminist freedom, then how do you stop that at the 9 months before a child's born?
Yeah.
If babies aren't babies until women say so, that has really, really dangerous implications. And if you think this is over the top, imagine 40 years ago, 50, 45 years ago, 50 years ago when Roe versus Wade came into being, people arguing, those of us who weren't even alive yet but have heard these arguments. 50 years ago, the argument was, if you legitimize abortion on demand, what you're doing effectively is replacing birth control with abortion, or making abortion a kind of birth control. 40, 50 years ago, they said the same things now that people are saying about the following argument, that if birth control is abortion, then if the mother herself is completely responsible for when a child lives, that doesn't have to extend just to the 9-month term of pregnancy anymore.
Yeah. And I guess the argument also to be made is that only thing that Michelle Wolf has ever stopped is comedy, because right now, nothing is funny, anything coming out from the left.
Well, she hasn't aborted comedy. She hasn't killed comedy. She just prevented, her show prevents comedy from being.
Happening.
Okay, there we go.
Absolutely. Okay, so back to other things that, even leading up to the pick of Kavanaugh, we had the left and the pro-abortion women out there cycling their news. And we actually had a story about women who are arguing to go on a sex strike in order to save Roe v. Wade. So I guess just by the headline alone, I guess the way to save Roe v. Wade is just to not have sex altogether. It's some sort of empowerment.
Shouldn't you, if you're going to have this article and this conversation, shouldn't you put up a picture of an actual woman? I mean,
That's not on my end. Yell at Mike for that one.
Well, look, here's the thing that amazes me about this. So pro-abortion women now are going to stop having sex in the name of the right to abortion. This blows me away, because what you're basically assuming here, what these pro-abortion women are basically telling you is when it comes to sex, they do have boundaries. When it comes to sex, they do have morality. When it comes to sex, they are willing to stop having sex if the consequences of having sex are too dangerous. So they believe that by continuing to have sex as normal, these so-called women, these progressive women, that one of the consequences of this is that Roe versus Wade is going to be banned. And yet, the same women will tell you that we don't have to be responsible when it comes to giving birth to babies. We should be able to have sex or withhold sex if we want to in the name of consequences. The only consequence we don't give a rat's ass about is the consequence of murdered babies. So in other words, you see the hypocrisy of the progressive feminist left. They do believe that sex is a moral issue. They do believe that sex should have boundaries. They do believe that sex should be boycotted if bad results happen. The only bad result they're willing to accept, absolutely and without question, is the slaughter of babies. That tells you what an absolutely hypocritical, ridiculous movement this is.
Yeah, well, even though that article is talking about how we should stop having sex, Planned Parenthood in New York is saying, have all the sex you want, because they just came out with a campaign that says that we need to protect our freedom to F. And this campaign, this commercial they put out is touted as being fearless. So Planned Parenthood of New York City is claiming that the Big Apple, the residents there have more sex than anyone else in America. Good for them. Now, they want to make sure that everyone has access to the sexual and reproductive health care services they need. So Planned Parenthood launched this fundraising campaign. So they want to raise money in order to abort more babies, and in addition to that, give some reproductive health care.
Yeah, and go back to the image. Once again, you see the American left fighting about Roe versus Wade without any women present, right? Here you have two men in bed, the campaign, Planned Parenthood in New York City's explicit campaign, protect our right to F, touted as fearless, okay? So again, the gender models for what's supposed to be an underlying Roe versus Wade campaign is two dudes in bed. right? 2 woke black dudes in bed. All right, so let this sink in again. On the one hand, these feminists are telling you we will not have sex until Roe versus Wade is guaranteed. On the other hand, these feminists are telling you we in New York have the right to F anyone we want, anytime we want, without any consequences whatsoever. So there are consequences to sex. That might be the elimination of Roe versus Wade, but we still want to F anybody we want at any time for any reason. And I love this. Notice how the American left is also conflating Roe versus Wade with birth control, sexual reproductive health. I told you earlier in the segment, this is exactly what they're doing. They're trying to pretend that a serious judicial reconsideration of really bad constitutional law, Roe versus Wade, is actually an attack on all reproductive health care, including for 2 dudes in bed. I guess what? Astroglide? I mean, because of what's going on here, right, potentially with Roe versus Wade and Brett Kavanaugh, the American left in New York would have you believe that your right to buy water-soluble lube is on the table here. This shows you what I was trying to tell you before. This has absolutely nothing to do with the underlying idea of whether or not Roe versus Wade is good law or whether or not there should be boundaries or limits or moral aspects to pregnancy. The American left, without even realizing it, has already acknowledged that. This is all about the right of leftist progressive politics to proceed the way it wants to. Libertine to break down traditional values, to unmake religious values, to argue for a kind of radical sexual individualism that gets morphed into this collective leftism that is itself a cult. And so, again, they can't even put a man and a woman in bed when they're dealing with this. And it shows you just how much more extreme and radical this entire process is. It has very little to do with actual abortion. They want to keep a whole bunch of other things moving in a progressive direction.
Yeah, and if you actually watch the full ad, every other word out of their mouth is basically F, and they are targeting specific audiences. The CEO of the ad agency, Gerard Caputo, actually said the focus of this is the millennial generation. They're trying to get these people younger and younger. He said that Planned Parenthood of New York City wanted to be celebratory in the face of massive opposition rather than plead their case in a typical PSA. So this ad is meant to speak to a younger generation more empowered than ever and hopefully willing to help. It all starts with the courage to do something different, and we believe we've already succeeded.
Yeah, and this is a huge point. Again, this shows you the danger of education. Serious adults for far too long have allowed Planned Parenthood into our elementary schools. The under Common Core and all these various Fed education programs, sexuality education, which really means not biology, not the biology of sex, but mores, sexual attitudes and mores, are being taught to our kids at younger ages. Are we surprised that Planned Parenthood, in trying to protect Roe versus Wade, which is not terribly popular among millennials. Millennials seem to have a more moral conscience, more reservations about abortion than baby boomers do or later generations. And so what is Planned Parenthood doing? They're doing an end run around Roe versus Wade by targeting young children, millennials and younger kids who have scruples about Roe versus Wade, but who have been taught to believe that sex is whatever you want, whenever you want it. We have done a really bad job, I guess is the word I would use, teaching younger children that sex is okay anytime, anywhere. So Planned Parenthood realizes that they can't get younger people to come out in mass to support abortion. But what they can do is play upon their fears, right? You're a young child, you're a young person, you're a teenager or a 20-year-old, you ought to be able to F anybody you want anytime. Millennials have bought that lie. We've convinced them of that. And yet still they find abortion more problematic than previous generations. This is Planned Parenthood now going around a problem with the younger generation. They've sexualized kids, but they still haven't been able to take these radically sexualized kids and turn them into pro-abortion warriors.
Yeah, well, we're going to circle back here to wrap up because
wrap up. That's a great birth control term, isn't it? Let's just
we'll
be very
Planned Parenthood.
Let's be very Planned Parenthood today.
Wrap it up. Okay, so we're going to wrap this segment up. It all circles back now to, let's go to not just New York City, but the whole state of New York with the governor, Andrew Cuomo, came out and basically made a threat to the Supreme Court. And this all ties back into Brett Kavanaugh and potentially being the next Supreme Court justice. So he's threatening to sue the Supreme Court of the United States over the issue of Roe v. Wade. Here's the issue, Andrew Cuomo. If you need to appeal, okay, who are you going to go to? Go to the circuit court. Okay, you lose again. Who are you going to go to? You can't sue the Supreme Court. Pick up a book and just read.
I love the idea that he's going to sue the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court will also ultimately get to hear the lawsuit. I would love to see a conservative Supreme Court with Brett Kavanaugh, newly minted as an associate justice, taking on Andrew. Andrew thinks he's the Pope. Remember his father, Mario Cuomo, right? Yes. I think Rush Limbaugh refers to him as Mario the Pious, right? Pope Pious Mario, liberal pieties. Andrew Cuomo is the redheaded stepchild, the dauphin of stupidity when you think about that family. But by all means, and here's the thing that's so hypocritical about what Andrew Cuomo's talking about. Andrew Cuomo is in the process right now, isn't he, of strengthening New York state abortion laws, right? So that even in the eventuality that Roe versus Wade is overturned, New York's right to an abortion will absolutely exist. By definition, again, Andrew, this is why you don't need Roe versus Wade. If you had half a brain in that head of yours, you would realize that what you're able to do in New York, a state's issue, to protect the rights of abortion, the Supreme Court can't touch that. It won't touch that. Getting rid of Roe versus Wade, if it went away, would allow you in New York to guarantee those rights. In fact, getting rid of Roe versus Wade would do what should have happened from the first place. Abortion rights wouldn't immediately go away. What would happen is each state would have to make its own decision. The people living in those states would have to vote for what they want. But Mario the Pious and his child, Andrew the Stupid, they don't want those kinds of common sense solutions. They want a Supreme Court that acts as if it were an executive branch, that issues diktats, that tells everybody else how they should live. As long as that's things like abortion, the left is 100% behind that. And it's ironic to me that the left is arguing that if you put Brett Kavanaugh on, he's going to dictate to people what they must and must not do. When you think about it, it was 9 black-robed judges, 9 men who issued a similar diktat that got Roe versus Wade implemented in the first place.
Yeah, I'm going to put my head to the desk because that's where it belongs.
Major
right now.
Facepalm.
All right, so if you are picking up your head off the desk now, make sure you head over to YouTube and give us a like there. If you're listening to this, you might be on SoundCloud or iTunes. You can always give us a review there. And we have more about the Supreme Court next on Talking Points with Dr. Duke and Charlie Kirk.
Time now for Talking Points with Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA. Charlie, I want to continue our conversation about the Supreme Court here and the newly nominated Brett Kavanaugh. What was your first reaction when you found out it was Associate Justice Kavanaugh?
Sure. So he wasn't my first pick or my second pick, but he's still a great pick. And, you know, the more I learn about him and the more I see the left's outrage about him, the more I actually like him. You know, I was joking around. The atheists hate him. The feminists hate him. The leftists hate him. The Marxists hate him. All the people that I don't really have much respect for seem to really hate this guy. So it makes me like him a lot. He seems like a very outstanding individual. It was a safer pick than Barrett or Kethledge. That was probably more where I would have preferred the president go. But Kavanaugh is very strong on the Second Amendment, very strong on immigration issues. He has ruled properly basically on every issue. And there was a study done by PBS that showed, based on past rulings, where do these judges fall ideologically. And he was actually would have been rated even further to the right of Gorsuch at the time of nomination, which really surprised me. He's going to do a terrific job. He will get confirmed. You already have vocal support from some of the more difficult senators, such as McCain and Corker. They already said they're going to support him, which is a terrific sign. So look, it's a great nomination. It's going to put the court in the correct direction, one that is interpreting the Constitution as written, not as how you wish it to be. This is just another win for the greatest president of our generation.
I love your point that all the people we don't really like and America really needs less of are the ones who are opposed to this. Apparently, even the Hollywood foodie crowd is opposed to him. There's a new article out today lamenting the fact that when he was in college, he liked to eat bland food like cheese pizza. If that's the most you've got on this guy, you think about the kind of attacks the left are waging now. They don't like the name Brett. They think it's too frat boy. They don't like the way he ate when he was a college student. Doesn't that sort of tell us that there's very little out there, very few skeletons in this man's closet?
There's almost none. I mean, this guy has lived such a clean and clear-cut life. I mean, the attack is that he racked up a lot of debt watching baseball games. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, this is really all that they have to attack this man? But look, they're trying to find a way to destroy his nomination because they know that he's going to rule properly on some of the biggest issues of our time, whether it be the travel ban, immigration, Second Amendment issues, guns, rule of law. I mean, and he's going to be very much in the mold of Scalia and Gorsuch. And guess what? This is not going to be the president's last Supreme Court nominee, and that's really, really exciting when you think about it. So he got Gorsuch in, he'll get Kavanaugh in, and then maybe we'll see who's next. But I think some of the other people on the list, I'd love to see Barrett on the court one day. If you ask me, I think she'd be a great addition. But this is a very exciting moment for America. And look, it shouldn't be, the Supreme Court should not be a politicized branch of government, but the left has made it one. They've made it one because they don't like the laws, therefore they want to interpret it as they see fit. And that's wrong and corrosive for our society.
Yeah, you make a really good point, too, Charlie, that a lot of people wanted Barrett. I'm with you. I think she would have been my first choice. But when you stop and think about it the way Donald Trump has, it's really, really extremely likely, especially when Donald Trump wins a second term, it's extremely likely that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not going to be around for 6.5 more years. It would be much harder to replace Ruth Ginsburg with a Brett Kavanaugh, a male justice. That's the perfect slot, it seems to me, for Mrs. Barrett if he gets that far.
That's right. And you have to factor in, when we approved Gorsuch, we had an extra Senate seat in Alabama that we have lost since. So the president's looking at the map, and he got some good advice, I'm sure, where they said, well, Mr. President, you can roll the dice, but you can't lose many senators for this seat, for Barrett. They said, we're going into a midterm election. Let's put Donnelly and Manchin and McCaskill and Tester and Heidkamp on the hot seat, make them either vote for the Supreme Court nominee or oppose it. Someone you can't oppose, like Kavanaugh, who's ruled properly, super smart, unbelievable case history. Or we could go to the more controversial side, and they could come up with some excuse that individuals are fringe, right? So the president, I think the equivalent I would say is that, to use a football analogy, is it's before the half, you have the ball on your own 30-yard line, you know you're going to get the ball in the half, the second half begins, you just kind of run the ball and you let the time run out. That's the Kavanaugh pick. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. You have the lead. The Barrett pick would have been, let's play for a touchdown, and you could get intercepted, could get fumbled, to use football analogies. But I think more importantly, it's an assured win in a political climate where the Democrats are opposing everything the president is doing, and they look like fools. They look like absolute fools. And that's a very important political tool the president has.
Well, if the worst thing you can say about the new Justice Kavanaugh, is that he is a strict constitutionalist, boy, it's amazing to me how the left, you brought up the left there, how the left is really, before even the announcement was made, we had that faux pas where a leftist organization released a standard talking point that had XXX in, right? Because it didn't matter who Donald Trump nominated. This was going to be the reaction there. To what degree do you think the liberal left has lost their mind on this? And with that in mind, the 800 million pound Republican elephant in the room, when you boil this down for the leftists, this is all about Roe versus Wade, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all about Roe versus Wade, which it amazes me how they can go from pretending to care about kids in cages at the southern border, that was Obama's fault, and then talking about how they want to separate kids from mothers' wombs. It's like very strange how you're able to make that shift so quickly. I thought you care about kids. I guess you don't. For people might actually support abortion, there's no way you can actually defend what the court did for Roe versus Wade. It was imposing their own laws. It was passing their own laws. And secondly, it was ruled upon without any of the modern science or discovery that we have today. For example, when Roe versus Wade was decided, we did not know that every single baby in the womb had a unique code of DNA, never to be replicated again. It's only to be formed once at that very moment. It will never, ever, ever occur. That's a pretty amazing, scientific discovery we didn't know. Number two, we did not know definitively when a heartbeat began in the womb. Best guesses were around 18 to 20 weeks back then. It's actually 6 weeks. We didn't know that when Roe versus Wade was decided. And third, which I think is most interesting, is that the woman that actually was in the Roe versus Wade case, she regrets it. She regrets ever bringing the case. She thought it was the worst thing that ever happened. And she's become she was a vocal spokesperson against it. And then finally, I think this is really the point that we need to make, is the collateral and carnage, the collateral damage and the carnage that ruling has really ensued. And the most dangerous place for a young person to be is in a mother's womb. And what does that say about a society if we are not able to protect those that simply there's no way they can protect themselves? And I think that's why the left, for whatever reason, is doing everything they can to protect Roe versus Wade. It's very sick to me.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the progressives' inability to see their own hypocrisy. You just mentioned a great example. They claim to be the party of the most vulnerable, and yet the most vulnerable, they are so cavalier about life in the womb. I think about Andrew Cuomo, right, who is now coming out in New York. He's already trying to strengthen laws so that if Roe versus Wade is eventually overturned, that a New York woman's right to an abortion remains in place, without even recognizing the fact that his own argument is making the case we're making. Roe versus Wade is bad constitutional law. 9 men, you want to talk about 9 guys without all of the scientific data coming up with some obscure 14th Amendment argument about privacy to jam abortion rights into federal law, when in reality, people like Andrew Cuomo, I hate to point it out to him, would be much better off if there was no Roe versus Wade, so that states like New York can continue to abort away if that's what if the majority of the people in the state think they need to do.
Right. Well, he's such a moron. I mean, he tweets out, he's like, I'm going to appeal the decision. Like, who are you going to appeal it to? It's the Supreme Court. You can't appeal the Supreme Court. You're an idiot. He tweets out, he says, I'm going to appeal the decision if Roe versus Wade is overturned. What, are you going to go to the UN? I mean, seriously, it's just like these guys. I don't know if they're actually thinking through this stuff, or they just sounds like it. Like, could you imagine the staff meeting? For your viewers that don't know, Andrew Cuomo tweeted out, he said, I'm going to appeal the decision of Roe versus Wade if it's overturned. But just so everyone is clear, there is no higher court in the Supreme Court. There's no appellate court. That's it. It's definitive. It's over. So could you imagine the staff meeting when they're about to send out that tweet? Oh, you know, it'd be really great, Governor, is we say we're going to appeal it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to say, like, well, no, there is no appeal process for the Supreme Court. Anyway, you're exactly right, but it's amazing to me. Cuomo's
well, I've contended for a long time that when Barack Obama won in 2008, as if the left had gotten their own pope. You think about all of the executive orders, all of the post-constitutional ways, that illegal thing in many ways, that Obama got his will imposed on the American people. I really think that progressives like Andrew Cuomo think that he'll be able to appeal to Barack Obama somehow over the Supreme Court. It really does show one of the great achievements of the Trump administration is to pull us back from that kind of rule by diktat and give us again a national discourse on really important issues.
Totally. And, I remember the Obama years, and they attacked Trump as being secretive and all this. This is the most transparent president in American history. I mean, he literally tweets in real time what he's thinking, what he's doing, what direction he's heading. With Obama, it would be days. We're like, where is he? What is he doing? So, he's in Hawaii. Okay. But, also Obama ruled by absolute executive fiat. President Trump has been well within the rule of law, and all of his actions have been upheld by the Supreme Court. You look at the travel ban, it was upheld by the Supreme Court, so on and so forth. And Obama and the left, they have total disregard for the rule of law because they consider the rule of law to be an impediment for their radical leftist Marxist agenda. Never forget that. They think the rule of law is a speed bump. It is a barrier. It is an obstacle for them to instill what they believe to be the best thing for society, and that's wrong and corrosive.
You already hinted at strategy here, Charlie, and before you go, I want to ask you about this. You mentioned people like McCain and certain Republicans who are usually a thorn in the Republican side seem to be already lining up behind the new justice. But do you think there are any more Republicans? Can we count on maybe Susan Collins, or is that a lost cause? And do you think any Democrats will rally to this pick?
Yeah, I think certain Democrats such as Manchin, Donnelly, McCaskill, Heidkamp, Tester, hopefully will come on board. But look, I think Collins and Murkowski are going to have a tough time opposing him. I really do. I think that the support in the Republican Party is there. The support in their home states is there for confirming Kavanaugh. And I think he'll get confirmed just like Gorsuch by 54 or 55 votes. I really do.
Yeah, I think you're right as well. And so then we look forward to the retirement of Justice Ginsburg for really mind-blowing leftist meltdowns. Charlie, my friend, it's a great pleasure talking to you.
And also, here's a crazy thing. I'm not advocating for it, but imagine if President Trump started to pack the court and just said, I'm going to nominate 50 all conservatives. I'm not saying he should do it, but the left would if they were in his position.
Well, the left already brought it up. So if Donald Trump really wants to spook him, he should just threaten to do it and just watch the meltdown. It'd be a thing of beauty.
He should nominate 50 people. Could you imagine?
Charlie, it's great to see you. We'll talk to you next week. And that does it for us this week at the Dr. Duke Show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, and we will see you next time.